Once upon a time, in a big, bright village where birds sang sweet songs and tall trees seemed to dance with the wind, there lived a young boy named Kelechi. Kelechi was known throughout the village, not just for his bright smile, but for his incredible kindness and bravery. Everyone in the village admired him, and wherever he went, people would say, "Look, there goes Kelechi, the heart of our village." Kelechi lived with his mother, Amara, in a cozy little house on the edge of the village. His father had passed away many years ago, leaving Kelechi and his mother to look after each other. Even though they didn't have much, their home was always filled with laughter, love, and the warm scent of Amara's cooking. Now, the village where Kelechi lived was special, not just because of its beauty, but because it was surrounded by a magical forest. This forest was full of tall trees, colourful flowers, and animals that people said could talk. But there was one rule about the forest that everyone followed. No one was allowed to go deep into it. There were stories of strange happenings, creatures that lived in the heart of the forest, and mysteries that no one dared to discover. Kelechi, being the adventurous boy he was, often wandered near the edge of the forest, dreaming of what lay beyond. He would imagine all sorts of things: a hidden treasure, magical creatures, or maybe even a secret village where people lived differently, but no matter how strong his curiosity was, he always obeyed his mother's words. "Stay close to home, my son. The forest is not a place for children." One day, while Kelechi was playing by the edge of the forest, he heard a strange noise. It sounded like someone was calling for help. His heart raced, and he looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. The sound seemed to be coming from deep within the forest, far beyond where he was allowed to go. Kelechi hesitated. He knew the rules. No one was supposed to go into the forest, but the voice sounded so desperate, and Kelechi's heart was too kind to ignore someone in need. Without thinking much further, he stepped into the forest, his feet moving quickly toward the sound. As he walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and the light from the sun faded. It was like entering a different world, a place where time moved slower and the air felt heavier. The birds stopped singing and the forest became eerily quiet except for the faint sound of the voice calling for help. "Kelechi, help me, please," the voice whispered. The deeper Kelechi went, the louder the voice became. It sounded familiar, like someone he knew, but he couldn't quite place it. Finally, after walking for what felt like hours, he reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was an old twisted tree. Its branches reached out like long arms, and at its base there was a small wooden door. Kelechi was puzzled. A door in a tree, he thought to himself. He had never seen anything like it before. The voice was coming from behind the door. Taking a deep breath, Kelechi walked up to the door and knocked gently. "Hello? Is anyone there?" he called out. There was no response, only the wind rustling the leaves above him. After a moment of hesitation, Kelechi reached for the handle and opened the door. Inside was a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the ground. Kelechi's heart pounded in his chest. His mother's warning echoed in his mind. "Stay close to home, my son." But something deep inside him urged him forward. He couldn't turn back now. He had come this far, and he had to know what was down there. As he descended the stairs, the air grew colder, and the walls around him felt damp. The sound of the voice had stopped, and all Kelechi could hear was the sound of his own footsteps echoing in the darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kelechi reached the bottom of the staircase. In front of him was a large stone chamber, lit by small flickering candles. In the center of the room was an old man sitting on a wooden chair. His hair was long and white, and his eyes were closed as if he was sleeping. Kelechi approached the man cautiously. "Excuse me, sir?" he said softly. "Are you the one who called for help?" The old man slowly opened his eyes, and a smile crept across his face. "Ah, Kelechi," he said, his voice low and raspy. "I've been waiting for you." Kelechi took a step back, startled. "How do you know my name?" he asked. The old man chuckled. "I know many things, young one. I know you're brave, and I know you care deeply for your village, but most importantly, I know you're the one who can help me." Kelechi's curiosity was piqued. "Help you with what?" The old man's smile faded and his expression grew serious. "You see, Kelechi, I have been trapped in this forest for many, many years. I was once a powerful guardian of the village, but I made a mistake. I ventured too deep into the forest and disturbed something I should not have. Because of that, I was cursed to stay here, hidden from the world. But you, Kelechi, you can break the curse." Kelechi's heart raced. "How? What do I need to do?" The old man pointed to a small golden key hanging from a chain around his neck. "Take this key," he said, "and go to the heart of the forest. There you will find a locked chest. Inside the chest is the source of the curse. Destroy it and the curse will be lifted." Kelechi hesitated for a moment. The idea of going even deeper into the forest frightened him, but he couldn't leave the old man trapped like this. He nodded and took the key from the old man's hands. "Be careful, young one," the old man warned. "The forest is full of dangers and the curse is strong, but I believe in you. You have the heart of a true hero." With the key in hand, Kelechi left the chamber and made his way deeper into the forest. The trees grew even taller, and the air grew colder. It felt as though the forest itself was watching him, waiting to see what he would do next. After what felt like hours of walking, Kelechi finally reached the heart of the forest. In the center of a small clearing was the chest the old man had spoken of. It was old and covered in vines, and the lock was rusted with age. Kelechi approached the chest cautiously and inserted the key into the lock. With a soft click, the lock opened, and the chest slowly creaked open. Inside the chest was a small, glowing stone. It pulsed with an eerie light, and as Kelechi stared at it, he could feel its power. This was the source of the curse. Kelechi knew what he had to do. He took the stone in his hands, and with all his strength, threw it to the ground. The stone shattered into 1,000 pieces, and a powerful gust of wind swept through the forest. The trees around him began to sway, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. For a moment, Kelechi thought the forest might collapse around him. But then, just as quickly as it had begun, the wind died down and the forest grew still. The curse had been broken. Kelechi stood in the clearing, breathing heavily, as the realization of what he had just done washed over him. He had freed the old man, and the forest was no longer cursed. A sense of relief and pride filled his heart. As he made his way back through the forest, the trees seemed brighter and the air felt lighter. The birds had returned, and their songs filled the air once again. When Kelechi reached the old man's chamber, he found it empty. The old man was gone, freed from the curse that had trapped him for so many years. All that was left was the chair he had been sitting in, now covered in a fine layer of dust. Kelechi smiled to himself, knowing that he had done something truly important. He left the chamber and made his way back to the village, eager to tell his mother and the other villagers what had happened. When Kelechi returned to the village, he was met with cheers and applause. The villagers had heard of his bravery, and they were proud of him. His mother, Amara, hugged him tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Kelechi," she said softly, "you have made us all proud. You are truly the heart of our village." From that day forward, Kelechi was known not just for his kindness and bravery, but for his wisdom as well. The village thrived, and the forest, once feared, became a place of wonder and beauty once again. But as time passed, strange things began to happen. Though the forest was free of the curse, villagers started noticing something odd. The animals in the forest were acting differently. The deer that used to run away at the sight of people were now approaching them with curious eyes, and the birds seemed to be singing strange melodies, ones no one had heard before. One day, an old woman named Mama Nandi, who had lived in the village for as long as anyone could remember, called Kelechi to her house. She was known for her wisdom, and many in the village sought her advice in times of trouble. "Kelechi," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I have heard about what you did in the forest. You broke the curse, and for that, the village owes you much gratitude. But I must warn you, breaking a curse does not always mean the end of the story. Sometimes it opens the door to something else. Kelechi frowned, not fully understanding. What do you mean, Mama Nandi? The old woman leaned in closer. The forest is changing, and I fear that breaking the curse has awakened something even older, something that has been asleep for a very long time. You must be careful, Kelechi. The forest is not just a place of trees and animals, it is alive, and it has its own spirit. Kelechi's heart sank. He had thought that by breaking the curse, he had freed the forest and the village from any danger. But now, he realized that there was more to the forest than he had ever imagined. What should I do? He asked, his voice filled with concern. Mama Nandi smiled gently. You are brave, Kelechi, and you have a pure heart. That is why the forest called to you. But now, you must go back. There is something deeper in the forest, something that must be understood, not destroyed. You must listen to the forest's song and find out what it wants. Kelechi nodded, though fear crept into his heart once again. The thought of returning to the forest, after all that had happened, made him uneasy. But he knew that he couldn't ignore Mama Nandi's warning. The next morning, Kelechi prepared himself for another journey into the forest. This time, he was not going to break a curse or save someone trapped by magic. He was going to listen, to understand. As he entered the forest, the familiar sense of wonder and mystery returned. But this time, Kelechi noticed something different. The trees seemed to whisper, their leaves rustling in a way that felt like they were speaking to him. The animals watched him, their eyes filled with a quiet knowing. Kelechi walked deeper and deeper into the forest, his heart open to whatever message it had for him. After hours of walking, he came to a large, ancient tree, much older than any he had seen before. Its roots stretched out like fingers, and its bark was thick and gnarled. Sitting at the base of the tree was a small, glowing figure. It was a spirit, its form shimmering with light, and its eyes filled with both sadness and wisdom. Kelechi, the spirit said, its voice soft but powerful. You have broken the curse, but in doing so, you have awakened me. I am the spirit of this forest, and I have been asleep for many, many years. Kelechi knelt before the spirit, humbled by its presence. What must I do? He asked. The spirit smiled gently. You have already done what was needed. By breaking the curse, you have restored balance to the forest. But now, you must help the village understand that the forest is not just a place to fear or to conquer. It is alive, and it must be respected. The villagers must learn to live in harmony with the forest, not apart from it. Kelechi nodded, understanding the spirit's message. He promised to share this wisdom with his village, to teach them to honor the forest and all that lived within it. When Kelechi returned to the village, he gathered the elders and shared with them the spirit's message. Together, they decided to create a tradition of visiting the forest, not to take from it, but to give thanks and to learn from its wisdom. And so, the village and the forest lived in harmony, each respecting the other, and Kelechi's story became one of not just bravery and kindness, but of understanding and balance.